You can learn everything about a person by watching how they treat someone they do not need. On most evenings, Harbor and Stone felt less like a restaurant and more like a carefully choreographed performance. Crystal glasses reflected the warm amber glow of hanging lights. Soft jazz drifted through hidden speakers. Outside, a cold autumn rain painted silver streaks across the windows overlooking downtown Boston. Inside, every table was occupied. Every server moved with practiced precision. Every smile seemed effortless, until the reservation appeared. The moment the host glanced at the screen, the energy changed. It happened so quickly that a customer would never notice it. But the staff did. One waitress suddenly became fascinated by reorganizing menus. Another disappeared into the kitchen. A bartender found an urgent reason to check inventory. The host quietly exhaled. Table 14. Nathan Sterling. The name alone was enough. Please tell me he canceled, a server whispered. The host shook his head. He is 5 minutes away. A collective silence followed. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just the kind of silence that came from experience. Nathan Sterling was one of the wealthiest men in the city. A self-made billionaire whose investments had transformed entire industries. He was also known for something else. Nobody liked serving him. He complained about food. He criticized service. He questioned prices. He sent meals back for reasons that often made little sense. Managers became nervous when he arrived. New employees were warned about him during training. Some staff members joked that serving Nathan felt like taking an exam nobody could pass. Who has table 14? Someone asked. Nobody answered immediately. Then a voice came from behind them. I do. Several heads turned at once. Emily Carter stood beside the service station, holding a tray of polished silverware. She had only been working at Harbor and Stone for 3 days. 27 years old. White. Calm. Professional. Knew enough that she still checked table numbers twice before approaching guests. She had not yet learned which customers frightened everyone else. You do not want table 14, another. Waitress said immediately. Emily blinked. Why? The staff exchanged glances. Trust us. Emily smiled politely. How bad can it be? Nobody laughed. That answer told her everything. Seriously, said the bartender. Ask for a switch. Emily looked around the room. Nervous faces. Avoided eye contact. Quiet warnings. The reaction seemed strangely intense. It is just a customer, she said. Not exactly, someone muttered. Before anybody could explain further, the front doors opened. A gust of cold air entered the restaurant. Conversations softened. The host straightened instinctively. Nathan Sterling had arrived. He looked exactly like the articles and interviews Emily had seen online. Early 40s. Tall. Sharp features. Expensive navy overcoat. A Swiss watch visible beneath one sleeve. The confidence of a man accustomed to entering rooms and immediately becoming the most important person inside them. Nathan handed his coat to the attendant without looking up. His eyes swept across the dining room. Not warmly. Critically. As if evaluating everything he saw. The lighting. The tables. The people. The host approached carefully. Good evening, Mr. Sterling. Your table is ready. Nathan nodded once. Nothing more. No smile. No greeting. He followed the host through the dining room, while several employees quietly avoided looking in his direction. Emily noticed that too. Interesting, she thought. Very interesting. Table 14 sat near the large windows overlooking the city. One of the best locations in the restaurant. Nathan took his seat and immediately picked up a menu. Less than 10 seconds passed before he frowned. The host visibly tensed. Emily noticed that too. Then she lifted a water pitcher and started walking toward the table. Emily, another server whispered urgently. You still have time to switch. Emily glanced back, then toward Nathan, then back again. No, are you sure? Emily smiled. Calm. Unhurried. Someone has to serve him. With that, she continued across the dining room. The rain tapped softly against the glass. Jazz floated through the air. And for reasons she could not yet explain, every employee in Harbor and Stone seemed to be watching her. Approach table 14. Emily stopped beside the table and offered the same professional smile she had given every customer since the beginning of her shift. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Harbor and Stone. My name is Emily, and I will be taking care of you tonight. Nathan Sterling did not immediately look up. He continued reading the menu for several seconds as if he had not heard her. Around the dining room, a few employees pretended not to watch. They failed. Everyone was watching. Finally, Nathan lowered the menu. His expression remained neutral. Not friendly. Not hostile. Simply difficult to read. Sparkling water, he said. Imported. Emily nodded. Of course. Not the domestic brand. Understood. Chilled properly. Absolutely. Nathan studied her for a moment. Most servers reacted differently. Some became nervous. Some rushed. Some overcompensated. Emily simply listened. Anything else, sir? She asked. Nathan returned his attention to the menu. That depends on whether this restaurant can follow simple instructions. A nearby server visibly winced after hearing the comment. Emily did not react. We will do our best. She turned and walked toward the service station. The moment she disappeared into the kitchen doorway, another waitress approached her. That is how it starts. Emily grabbed the bottle of imported sparkling water. How it starts? The comments. Emily smiled slightly. It was not that bad. The waitress laughed. Give it time. A few minutes later, Emily returned and carefully poured the water into a crystal glass. Nathan watched the process closely, almost suspiciously. When she finished, he took a sip. Silence. Emily waited. Nathan set the glass down. Acceptable. Several employees nearby exchanged surprised looks. Acceptable was apparently a good beginning. Emily handed him the menu. Would you like a few more minutes? Nathan looked up. How long have you worked here? The question caught her slightly off guard. 3 days. Nathan raised an eyebrow. 3 days. Yes, sir. That explains it. Emily remained calm. What does? You are still smiling. He returned to the menu. Emily almost laughed, but stopped herself. I enjoy my job. Nathan looked unconvinced. For now. Before Emily could respond, Nathan pointed at an entree. The filet. Excellent choice. No sauce. Of course. Vegetables on the side. Certainly. Medium rare. Absolutely. Nathan closed the menu. And if it arrives anything other than medium rare, I will send it back. Emily nodded. Then we will make sure it does not. Nathan stared at her. Waiting. Emily recognized the look immediately. He expected something. An apology. A nervous reaction. A sign of discomfort. Instead, she simply wrote down the order. The silence stretched slightly longer than normal. Finally, she smiled. I will place that right away. Then she walked away. Back at the service station, the bartender shook his head. You are handling this strangely well. Emily shrugged. He ordered dinner. That is not the point. Then what is? The bartender lowered his voice. Most people start feeling defensive after 5 minutes. Emily glanced toward table 14. Nathan was reviewing emails on his phone. Maybe he is having a bad day. The bartender nearly laughed. He has been having a bad day for 5 years. Emily said nothing. Instead, she watched Nathan from across the room. Something felt unusual. Not his attitude. She had met difficult customers before. What felt unusual was how carefully he observed everyone around him. Nothing escaped his attention. The lighting, the service, the timing, the details. It almost felt less like dining and more like evaluation. 30 minutes later, the filet arrived exactly as ordered. Evening, the entire restaurant seemed to stop and listen. The question lingered above the table like a challenge nobody else wanted to touch. Around the dining room, conversations continued, plates moved between tables, and jazz drifted softly through the speakers. Yet Emily could feel the attention of half the restaurant focused on table 14. She looked at the side of potatoes, then at Nathan Sterling, then back at the plate. Most people would have rushed to agree with him. Others would have apologized immediately. Emily did neither. Honestly, she asked. Nathan leaned back slightly. Please. Emily considered her answer carefully. I think they are warmer than average. Nathan's expression remained unreadable. Warmer than average. Yes. So you agree with me. Emily shook her head gently. Not completely. A nearby server nearly dropped a tray. Nathan's eyes narrowed with interest. Not anger. Interest. Explain. Emily glanced at the plate. If the goal is perfect consistency, I understand your concern. She looked back at him. But if you are asking whether they affect the quality of the meal, I do not think they do. Silence. Several employees stopped pretending not to listen. Nathan studied her face. Waiting for uncertainty. Waiting for fear. Neither appeared. Emily simply stood there calmly, hands folded, professional and composed. Finally, Nathan asked, and if I disagree? Then I will gladly bring you a new side. The answer came immediately. No hesitation. No defensiveness. Nathan looked almost disappointed. You are not going to argue with me? Emily smiled slightly. You are the guest. That does not answer the question. No, she admitted. It does not. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Nathan surprised her. A faint smile appeared. Small, brief, gone almost instantly. Interesting. Emily nodded politely. Would you like a replacement? Nathan picked up his fork. No, he took another bite. Leave them. Across the restaurant, several employees exchanged confused glances. Emily thanked him and stepped away. The moment she reached the service station, 3 servers surrounded her. What was that? One whispered. Emily blinked. What? Nobody talks to him like that. I was polite. Exactly. Another waitress stared at her. You disagreed with him. Emily laughed softly. Not really. You absolutely did. Emily looked back toward table 14. Nathan had already returned to his meal. He asked for my opinion. And you gave it. Yes. That is the problem. Emily shook her head. The entire situation felt strangely exaggerated. Difficult customer. Honest answer. End of story. Yet the reactions around her suggested something very different. An hour passed. The restaurant remained busy. Rain continued tapping against the windows. Nathan finished his dinner but remained seated, occasionally checking messages on his phone. Emily noticed that unlike many wealthy customers, he rarely looked distracted. He observed everything. The speed of service, the interactions between staff members, the way managers moved through the dining room. It felt less like dining and more like research. Eventually, Emily approached to clear his plate. Can I bring you dessert this evening? Nathan glanced at the menu. What would you recommend? The question surprised her. Personally, unless there is someone else standing here. Emily smiled. The bourbon pecan cheesecake. Nathan studied her carefully. Because it is the most expensive? No. Because it is the most popular? No, Nathan folded his arms. Then why? Emily looked toward the dessert station. Because the pastry chef has spent 6 months perfecting it, and nobody talks about it enough. For the first time all evening, Nathan laughed. A real laugh. Short but genuine. Nearby employees looked shocked. Emily did not. Bring me the cheesecake, he said. 1 slice. Excellent choice. As she walked toward the kitchen, Nathan watched her go. Something about the new waitress refused to fit the pattern he expected. She was not intimidated. She was not trying to impress him. She was not treating him differently because of his money. And for reasons he could not yet explain, that bothered him far less than it should have. In fact, it was beginning to make him curious. The cheesecake arrived 10 minutes later on a dark ceramic plate beneath a delicate drizzle of caramel. Emily placed it carefully in front of Nathan and stepped back. The bourbon pecan cheesecake, she said. Prepared this afternoon. Nathan glanced at the dessert. You seem unusually confident about it. Emily smiled. I have seen disappointed customers. I do not think you will be one of them. Nathan studied her for a second before cutting into the first bite. Around the restaurant, several employees continued working while quietly monitoring table 14. It had become a habit over the years. Whenever Nathan Sterling visited, everyone paid attention. Not because they wanted to, because experience had taught them something unexpected could happen at any moment. Nathan tasted the cheesecake. Then another bite. His expression remained unreadable. Emily waited. Finally, he set down his fork. The texture is good. Nearby staff exchanged glances. Another compliment. Rare territory. I will let the pastry chef know, Emily replied. Do that. She nodded and prepared to leave. One more thing. Emily turned back. Yes, sir. Nathan gestured toward the empty seat across from him. Sit down. The request caught her off guard. So did the reaction from everyone within hearing distance. A manager looked up immediately. 2 servers froze near the service station. Emily remained calm. I appreciate the invitation, she said politely, but employees are not permitted to sit with guests. Nathan leaned back. I am aware. Then you understand why I cannot. For a moment, he simply looked at her. Most people would have sat down. Emily smiled. Then it is fortunate you asked me. Nathan almost laughed again. Almost. Instead, he folded his hands. Interesting answer. Emily waited. Was there anything else I can help you with? Nathan looked toward the rain outside the windows. Actually, yes. He pointed toward the menu. I would like the seafood risotto. Emily blinked. The seafood risotto? Yes. For tonight. That is generally how restaurants work. Emily glanced toward the kitchen clock. The dinner rush was nearly over. The risotto is not available after 10 o'clock. Nathan checked his watch. It is 10:02. Correct. So technically, the kitchen is still open. Emily understood immediately. Several nearby employees did too. This was the moment everyone had warned her about. The impossible request. The rule-bending demand. The test. Nathan watched her carefully, waiting, not for the answer, for the reaction. Emily considered the situation, then nodded once. Give me a moment. She walked to the kitchen. The staff immediately surrounded her. Do not tell me he wants the risotto. He wants the risotto. Groans erupted. The head chef rubbed his forehead. The station is already closed. Emily nodded. I know. So tell him no. Emily looked toward the dining room window where Nathan sat alone. Calm. Patient. Watching. Maybe. The chef frowned. Maybe. Emily thought for a moment, then walked toward a refrigerator near the prep station. Do we still have the seafood prepared for tomorrow? Yes. And the rice? Of course. Emily smiled slightly. Then the issue is not whether we can make it. The chef crossed his arms. The issue is that we stopped serving it. Emily nodded. Exactly. 5 minutes later, she returned to the table. Nathan looked up immediately. Well, Emily placed a fresh cup of coffee beside him. The risotto is unavailable. Nathan showed no surprise. I expected that. Emily continued. However, the chef is willing to prepare a smaller seafood entree using the same ingredients if you would like an alternative. Nathan remained silent. Emily stood calmly. No apology. No excuses. No frustration. Just a solution. Finally, Nathan asked, so you are refusing the request? No, Emily shook her head gently. I am respecting the kitchen's standards while still trying to help you. Silence settled between them. The rain tapped softly against the glass. Somewhere across the room, a coffee cup clinked against a saucer. Then something unexpected happened. Nathan smiled. Not briefly this time. Not reluctantly. A genuine smile. You know, he said quietly. You might be the first person all year who has told me no without making it sound personal. For a moment, Emily simply looked at him. Around the restaurant, nobody could hear every word being exchanged at table 14, but everyone could sense the change. The tension that had followed Nathan Sterling through the evening had softened into something else. Curiosity, respect, perhaps even relief. Emily smiled lightly. Most requests are not personal. Nathan stirred his coffee slowly. You would be surprised. Emily glanced toward the rain-speckled windows. Maybe. Nathan watched her carefully. You think I test people? It was not a question. Emily considered her answer. I think you pay attention. That is a diplomatic response. It is an honest one. Nathan leaned back in his chair. The warm restaurant lighting reflected off the face of his watch. And what have you noticed? Emily could feel the question carrying more weight than it appeared. This was no longer about dinner. It had not been about dinner for quite some time. She folded her hands calmly. You notice mistakes quickly. Nathan nodded. True. You notice details other people miss. Also true. Emily hesitated briefly. And you seem to expect disappointment before it happens. The words settled quietly between them. Nathan's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes did. For the first time that evening, he looked away first. Toward the rain. Toward the city lights beyond the glass. Anywhere except directly at her. Interesting observation, he said. Emily remained silent. Sometimes silence revealed more than questions. Several seconds passed. Then Nathan spoke again. Do you know what happens when people discover who I am? Emily shook her head. Not always. A faint smile crossed his face. Everyone becomes different. He tapped one finger against the coffee cup. Some become nervous. Some become overly friendly. Some suddenly have business ideas. Emily listened. And some stop being honest. Nathan laughed softly. Especially that. Across the room, the bartender watched from a distance while polishing glasses. He had never seen Nathan talk this long to any server. Usually complaints came first. Then frustration. Then departure. Tonight felt completely different. Nathan looked back at Emily. You know what is strange? What? You did not ask what I do. Emily smiled. The internet exists. Nathan actually laughed. A real laugh again. Fair point. Besides, she added, your job is probably the least interesting thing about you. That answer caught him completely off guard. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Nobody has ever said that to me. Then people should. Nathan shook his head slowly. You really are different. Emily glanced toward another table where guests were preparing to leave. Not really. You are. Nathan studied her for a moment. Most people want something. From you. Yes. Emily thought about that. Then she looked around the restaurant. Servers cleaning tables. Guests finishing conversations. The quiet rhythm of an ordinary evening. Maybe that is the problem. Nathan frowned slightly. What is? Maybe too many people see your money before they see you. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable silence. Thoughtful silence. Nathan stared into his coffee. For the first time all evening, there was no challenge in his expression. No test. No criticism. Only reflection. Finally he looked up. And you do not. Emily smiled gently. I see a customer drinking coffee in a restaurant on a rainy night. Nathan held her gaze for several seconds. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not because she had impressed him. Not because she had won an argument. But because she had done something nobody else seemed willing to do. She had treated him like an ordinary human being. And somewhere beneath the polished success, the expensive suit, and the reputation that followed him everywhere, that simple gesture appeared to matter far more than either of them expected. The restaurant had grown quieter as the evening moved toward closing time. A few tables remained occupied, their conversations softened by the steady rain beyond the windows and the warm glow of the dining room lights. Emily returned to her work, helping other guests, clearing dishes, and refilling coffee cups. Yet every few minutes, she could feel Nathan Sterling's eyes following the rhythm of the restaurant. Not in an uncomfortable way, in an observant way, as if he were seeing something for the first time. Near the service station, the bartender approached her while polishing a glass. What exactly are you doing? Emily looked confused. Working. No, he shook his head. Whatever conversation you are having with him. Emily smiled. We are talking. That man has been coming here for years. The bartender lowered his voice. I have never seen him talk to a server for more than 2 minutes. Emily glanced toward table 14. Nathan was sitting quietly now, staring out at the rain-covered streets beyond the glass. Maybe he needed someone to listen. The bartender laughed softly. Or maybe he needed someone willing to disagree with him. Emily returned to collecting menus from an empty table. Across the room, Nathan remained seated. He could have left 30 minutes ago. His business meetings had ended. His meal was finished. Yet something kept him there. Eventually, Emily approached once more. Can I refresh your coffee? Nathan looked up from his thoughts. Please. She poured carefully. The dark coffee swirled beneath the soft light. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Nathan broke the silence. Can I ask you something? Emily nodded. Of course. Nathan studied the cup in front of him. Why are you not afraid of losing your job? The question caught her attention immediately. Why would I be? Because you have told a customer no multiple times tonight. Emily smiled slightly. Respectfully. Most people avoid that. Most people are trying to avoid conflict. Nathan leaned back. And you are not. Emily thought about it. I do not think honesty and conflict are the same thing. Nathan considered the answer carefully. You make that sound simple. Sometimes it is. The silence returned. Comfortable now. Nathan glanced around the restaurant. Servers cleaning tables. Managers reviewing reports. Employees laughing quietly as the rush finally ended. Do you know what everyone here thinks of me? Emily followed his gaze. Probably different things. Most of them avoid me. Emily did not deny it. She had seen the reaction when his reservation appeared. Nathan gave a small nod. They have reasons. Emily looked at him carefully. Do they? Nathan smiled without humor. You have not heard the stories? I have heard warnings. And Emily folded her hands. Warnings tell you what happened. She paused. They do not always tell you why. Nathan looked genuinely surprised by the answer. The rain tapped softly against the glass beside him. Somewhere in the kitchen, a tray rattled as someone prepared for closing. Finally, Nathan laughed quietly. You always do that. Do what? Answer a question with a bigger question. Emily smiled. Only when the bigger question matters. Nathan looked away for a moment. Toward the city lights. Toward reflections dancing across the wet pavement outside. Then he spoke so quietly that only she could hear. Maybe people stop seeing the difference after a while. Emily waited. The difference between being respected and being feared. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Honest. More honest than anything he had said all evening. Emily did not rush to answer. She simply stood beside the table and let the silence breathe. Because sometimes the most important thing a person can do is not offer advice. Sometimes it is allowing another person enough space to finally hear themselves. Emily remained beside the table while the silence settled between them. Nathan's words lingered in the air. The difference between being respected and being feared. Outside, the rain continued falling across the city streets. Inside, Harbor and Stone had nearly reached closing time. Most of the remaining guests were finishing their meals. A manager dimmed several lights near the far side of the dining room. The evening was slowly winding down. Yet for Nathan Sterling, it felt as though something was only beginning. Emily looked at him thoughtfully. "Can I tell you what I think?" Nathan nodded. "Please." She glanced toward the staff moving through the restaurant. "I do not think people fear success." Nathan listened. "I think they fear unpredictability." The answer surprised him. Emily continued. "People can handle high standards." She nodded toward the kitchen. "Our chef has high standards." Then toward the manager reviewing paperwork. "So does our manager." She smiled gently. "But people become nervous when they never know which version of someone they are going to meet." Nathan stared at his coffee. The observation landed harder than he expected. Emily had only known him for a few hours, yet somehow she was speaking about things nobody else seemed willing to mention. Across the room, an older couple stood to leave. Emily stepped away briefly to thank them for visiting. The couple smiled warmly before heading toward the exit. Nathan watched the interaction. She treated everyone exactly the same. Wealthy guests, regular customers, staff members. Nobody received special treatment. Nobody received less respect. A few minutes later, Emily returned carrying the final check presenter. She placed it gently beside his coffee cup. "Whenever you are ready." Nathan looked at the check but did not open it immediately. Instead he asked, "Can I ask you something else?" Emily smiled. "You have asked a lot of questions tonight." "I know." For the first time all evening, Nathan seemed almost self-conscious. "Why did you take this table?" Emily looked puzzled. "Because it was assigned to me." Nathan shook his head. "No." He glanced toward the service station. "Everyone knew who I was." Emily followed his gaze. Several employees quickly pretended to be busy. She laughed softly. "That is true. Most people tried to avoid serving me." "Also true." Nathan leaned forward slightly. "So why did you not?" Emily thought for a moment. Then her expression softened. "Because I have met difficult people before." Nathan smiled faintly. "That is not exactly flattering." "I am not finished." The smile remained. "Most difficult people are carrying something heavier than they admit." Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly. "And you believe that about me?" Emily shrugged. "I do not know you well enough to be certain." She paused. "But I know enough to wonder." The words settled quietly between them. No accusation. No judgment. Just curiosity. Genuine curiosity. Nathan looked down at the check presenter, then toward the rain outside. Finally he spoke. "Do you know what the strangest part of tonight is?" Emily waited. "Nobody here has challenged me in years." He laughed softly at himself. "People either agree with me or avoid me." Emily folded her hands. "Neither one is very useful." Nathan looked up. Their eyes met. For the first time that evening, neither Billionaire nor Waitress seemed especially important. They were simply two people having an honest conversation. Then a voice called from the kitchen. One of the cooks was saying good night. Another employee waved toward Emily before leaving through the back entrance. The restaurant was closing. The evening was ending. Yet Nathan suddenly realized something unexpected. He had arrived expecting another disappointing dinner. Instead, he had spent hours talking to the one person in the building who seemed completely unimpressed by his money. And somehow, that felt like the most valuable thing that had happened to him in a very long time. The last guests departed one table at a time. Chairs were being stacked in sections of the dining room. The jazz music had faded into something softer, quieter. Outside, the rain had finally begun to slow, leaving the city covered in reflections of gold and silver beneath the streetlights. Harbor and Stone was closing. Yet Nathan Sterling still sat at table 14. His coffee had long gone cold. The check remained untouched beside him. Emily noticed. "You know," she said as she walked by, "most people pay before their coffee gets cold." Nathan glanced at the cup and smiled. "Most people probably have somewhere to be." Emily laughed softly. "Fair enough." She began collecting nearby menus while the final staff members prepared for the end of the shift. For a moment neither spoke. Then Nathan looked toward her. "Can I ask one final question?" Emily smiled. "That depends." "On what?" "Whether it is actually the final question." Nathan laughed. "That is a fair concern." He watched her straighten a chair beside an empty table. "Why do you seem so certain of yourself?" The question surprised her. "Certain? You never hesitate." Emily shook her head. That is not true. It looks true. She thought for a moment before answering. Maybe because I spent years worrying about what other people thought. Nathan listened carefully. And eventually, I realized most people are too busy worrying about themselves. Nathan smiled. There is probably some truth in that. Emily leaned lightly against the service station. The restaurant was almost empty now. The atmosphere felt different. Less formal. More honest. Can I tell you something? She asked. Nathan nodded. Of course. Emily looked toward the dark windows. When I first walked over to your table tonight, everyone warned me. Nathan laughed softly. I figured. Some of them looked genuinely concerned. They had reasons. Emily smiled. Maybe. Nathan waited. But after meeting you, I kept feeling like something did not fit. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Meaning? You seemed less interested in being difficult than in seeing how people reacted. The answer hit surprisingly close to the truth. Nathan looked away briefly. Emily continued. At first I thought you were testing the restaurant. And now? He asked quietly. Emily studied him for a moment. Now I think you were testing people. Silence followed. The kind of silence that arrives when somebody says something accurate. Nathan slowly nodded. Not because he wanted to admit it. Because denying it would be pointless. Maybe. Emily smiled gently. Maybe. Nathan stared at the rain outside. Do you know how many people have approached me this year wanting something? A lot. More than I can count. His voice carried no pride. Only exhaustion. Partnerships. Investments. Introductions. Favors. He laughed quietly. Advice from people who have never built anything. Emily listened without interrupting. After a while, Nathan continued. You start wondering if anyone is talking to you because they actually want to. The restaurant seemed even quieter after that. Emily looked at him differently now. Not as a billionaire. Not as the customer everyone feared. Just as a person carrying a weight nobody else could see. That sounds lonely, she said. Nathan smiled faintly. It can be. For several seconds neither spoke. Then Emily said something that surprised him. Your money has nothing to do with your value. Nathan looked up. What? The reason I was not nervous. She shrugged slightly. Your money does not change my worth. So it never had any power over me. The words landed with remarkable force. Not because they were dramatic. Because they were sincere. Nathan sat perfectly still. Across the room, employees continued their closing routines. Dishes clinked softly in the distance. A manager turned off another row of lights. Yet for a moment, none of it seemed to matter. Because after years of hearing people react to his wealth, Emily had just given him an answer nobody else ever had. And for the first time all evening, Nathan Sterling found himself completely speechless. Nathan sat quietly for several seconds after Emily spoke. The restaurant around them continued its slow journey toward closing, but neither seemed aware of it anymore. The words lingered between them with unusual weight. Your money does not change my worth. Nathan looked down at the untouched check presenter beside his coffee cup. Over the years, he had heard countless opinions about wealth. Some admired it. Some envied it. Some chased it. Yet nobody had ever reduced it to something so simple. Emily had not been impressed by it. She had not been intimidated by it. She had simply placed it in its proper position, somewhere far below character. Finally, Nathan smiled. A real smile. The kind that reached his eyes. You know, he said quietly, I think you have accomplished something tonight that a room full of executives could not. Emily laughed softly. That sounds unlikely. It is true. Nathan stood and picked up his coat from the back of the chair. You made me listen. The words surprised even him. Across the room, the last few employees continued cleaning tables. A manager switched off another section of lights. Harbor and Stone had almost completed another ordinary night. Yet something about this evening no longer felt ordinary. Nathan opened the check presenter and reached for his pen. Emily prepared to excuse herself and finish her duties, but Nathan stopped her. One moment. She paused. Nathan wrote something carefully on a small piece of paper and folded it before placing it inside the presenter. Then he added his payment and closed it. Now you can go. Emily smiled. Thank you for visiting us tonight. Nathan shook his head gently. No. He glanced around the nearly empty restaurant. Thank you for not treating me differently. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then Emily answered with the same calm honesty she had shown all evening. Everyone deserves respect. Nathan nodded slowly. Maybe. He paused. But not everyone remembers that. With that, he slipped on his coat and started toward the entrance. Several employees noticed him leaving. Some seemed relieved. Others seemed curious. None of them had ever seen him spend an entire evening talking instead of complaining. Near the door, Nathan stopped and looked back one final time. Emily was already helping another employee stack menus for the next day. No celebration. No sense of victory. No attempt to take credit for anything. She was simply doing her job. The sight made him smile again. Then he stepped outside into the cool Boston night. The rain had stopped completely. City lights shimmered across the wet pavement like scattered gold. Inside the restaurant, Emily finally opened the check presenter. She expected a receipt, perhaps a note about the service. Instead, she found a folded piece of paper. Curious, she opened it. The message contained only a single sentence written in careful handwriting. "Thank you for treating me like a person." Emily stared at the note for a moment before folding it again. No signature was necessary. She slipped it into her apron pocket and continued her work. Nearby, the bartender approached. "So," he asked. Emily looked up. "So what? Was surviving table 14 worth it?" Emily smiled toward the rain-washed windows where Nathan had disappeared into the city. "I do not think anyone needed to survive anything." The bartender laughed. "Only you would say that." Perhaps he was right. As the final lights dimmed and the last chairs were placed on tables, Harbor and Stone settled into silence. Another shift had ended. Another customer had gone home. Yet somewhere beyond the money, the reputation, and the assumptions people carried about one another, something far more valuable had happened. Because sometimes the strongest person in the room is not the loudest. Sometimes it is the one who remains calm enough to see the human being standing behind the title. And sometimes a simple act of respect can change a night, a perspective, or even a life.